Alright guys, hope everyone's well and welcome back to the Improvement Podcast. So today I wanted to touch on what all successful splits involve. But first, quick update on myself. So I am currently 3 weeks out tomorrow from the British finals, or one of the first British finals this year, which I'm excited for. And I just had a show the weekend there that just went past, so this is the first time being back on the podcast since. I placed third, and as well as that, managed to get an invite for the British finals, which is exciting. So that's in London, like I said, in 3 weeks' time, which I'm looking forward to. And for the most part, I'm happy. I'm happy, but I'm not content with how I done. Meaning, like I improved on how I looked from the showing beforehand. I done everything I can to place as best as possible. I presented myself well on stage. I just need to be leaner, which is fine because we've got time to do so before the finals. So yeah, just basically back to work, trying to strip off some more body fat now. And I'm not really gonna, I'm not gonna touch on the whole weekend, but I have got a YouTube video coming out on that show day weekend, and captured as much as I could without taking up a ton of time, because obviously I wanted to focus on just enjoying it and doing well, and that kind of took away from the focus of recording it. But however, that will be coming out probably the day after this is live. So if you're watching this on the Saturday, it will probably be live on the Sunday, I assume, because I plan on editing it today. As for the episode, what all successful splits involve, the reason why I wanted to make a topic on this, or a podcast on this, is because I get a lot of questions like, what split should I do? What split is best for myself? And in reality, there's no best split. There's a lot of different splits you can run, like an upper body, lower body split, a push pull legs, maybe like even like a two body part split, so like chest and triceps, then back and biceps, and then legs and shoulders and arms, stuff like that. There's a lot of different splits out there, and you can critique each. You can say the pros and cons of each, and it does depend on what your physique requires and your training age, your training experience. There's a lot of considerations that go into it, and what I'd say is, when you are considering what split to do, think about the enjoyment factor. And the reason being is this will affect effort. So if on paper a split is the best possible split for yourself, it's what would be optimal and it's what's going to grant the most progress. If you absolutely hate it, you're probably not going to put as much effort into your sets. You're probably not going to get as much out of your training as a result of that. So that's something to definitely consider. Is it enjoyable? Is it one that you can stick to and you get a are you excited to go to the gym when you're on that split? Obviously, everyone has times where they're not, but if if you absolutely hate something, there's a difference between having an odd time where you don't want to train and just not enjoying the split at all. So that's something to consider, as well as, does it fit into your routine? And what I mean by this is, are the training days appropriate for your lifestyle and your schedule? Meaning, if let's say you work and like the way your shifts are set up, let's say you have 3 days on, and the 3 days you are on, you're working 12-hour shifts, then you probably want to have those days as rest days potentially, and you probably don't want to train a 6 day a week split. Whereas if let's say you work 5 days a week, then you can probably get away with doing, let's say, a 5 day a week split, or maybe a 6 day a week split if you wanted to. Not that I think that's best, but because you've got shorter shifts, because you've got the ability to train and still get good sleep that day. Because when it comes to trying to figure out if it fits into your routine, it shouldn't drastically take away from your sleep and cause you to be super stressed trying to fit those sessions in, because that's not going to do a lot of good, because when we're in a stress state, we don't recover effectively. And next up, we'll basically touched on that. Does it allow enough sleep? Because yes, you could say, oh, but I've got this extra session in, or I want to stick to my split, but if it means you're sleeping poorer, that's going to lead to poorer performance, which will lead to poorer muscle growth. So sometimes what's optimal on paper isn't if it's going to cause you to have poor sleep. So think about, when you are thinking about what's optimal, what allows you to recover effectively, what allows you to get good sleep and doesn't cause you to be super stressed. And this kind of ties back to what I've just spoke about, but is it sustainable? So, like, if it, regardless if you've got the time, if it's a 7-day-a-week split, then that's not going to be sustainable from a recovery standpoint. It's also probably going to lead you to burnout because mentally you need a rest day, and if not, you're probably not training hard enough. And as well as mentally needing a rest day, your body physically needs a rest day too. You can't just keep hammering yourself because we generate something called fatigue from training, physical mental tiredness to put it simple. And fatigue stops us from being able to reach as close to failure and recruit as much muscle fibers. And ultimately that's what leads to muscle growth. And if all of those are in line, meaning you're ensuring you're doing all the above, and you also back this with training hard, then you'll progress, regardless if it's an upper, lower, a push-pull legs. A lot of people miss the forest through the trees when it comes to it, meaning they stress about the wrong stuff. They stress about what split they're on, yet they're not consistent with their training, yet they don't put effort into their current split, yet they don't perform movements with good form. It's like, it doesn't matter if you do an upper lower split or push pull legs. If your form's poor, your form's poor. You're not going to be getting as much stimulation as you can from the exercises you're performing. So bear that in mind, and make sure you focus on that first, because having poor form and effort isn't going to get you anywhere regardless of what split you're on. The opposite applies. If form and effort are in place, then you will make progress. Some other considerations to make, as well as those basics I've just touched on, are adequate volume in your split. So have you got enough volume for each body part? So in this podcast, I'm not here to tell you need to do X amount of sets or this amount, because one, you're not going to gain anything from that, and two, you can't give an answer on it because everyone's different. Some people get really sore after training a body part, some people don't. Everyone trains with a different level of effort, everyone's got a different level of recovery, everyone's got a different split, and also the exercises you choose. For example, if I told you to do 8 sets for your quads throughout the week, and if, let's say, you done all 8 sets on the leg extension, that's going to provide a different outcome to saying do all 8 sets on squats, or with, let's say, a hack squat, something like that. It's going to yield different amounts of fatigue, different amounts of stimulus. So it's not something I can really tell you to do this amount. However, some things you can question are you getting a good pump? So let's say you train your legs. Are your quads full of blood? Do they feel like they're nice and big? Which is also referred to as the pump. Are you tired after your session? Do you just feel a bit battered, a bit like you've put a shift in? Especially leg training, you should be. Have you got any soreness the next day? You don't need to be sore, but if you've got a wee bit of soreness, that's a sign you're probably doing an appropriate amount. And do your legs does your muscles feel tired, whatever you've trained? Does it feel a bit like it's hard to put your hands on the steering wheel if you've just trained your shoulders? Does it feel like it's hard to walk upstairs if you've just trained your legs? And also, are you growing muscle? Because if you're doing the things that I just spoke about, like in terms of having a pump, getting tiredness, soreness in the muscle, training hard, you will probably be building muscle. But saying that, if you've not and your muscles are growing, then you're obviously doing something right. So question that: are you doing an adequate amount of sets? And a good way to in terms of how to work it out, just start at a place that looks reasonable, or drop me a message and ask me, and then from there do that amount of sets. And then, are you growing? Are you progressing in your sets well? If you are, don't change anything. if you feel like you're really not progressing, you're not building much muscle, then assess, are you having a pump, tiredness in the muscle, soreness, and does it just feel weak and heavy after your sessions? If not, add some sets. There's no harm in doing so, but start off on maybe the lower end and make sure effort's there, because if you start on the higher end and do a lot of volume in your sessions, then it's hard to develop training intensity. Like if I told you, right, you've got 1 set to do, give it your absolute all. Or if I said, right, we've got 5 sets to do, give all 5 sets your absolute all. You're like, oh, I've got 4 more sets, I need to give them all in. It's going to be really hard and difficult to fully commit to each set and make the most out of it if you know you've got the additional sets afterwards. Next up, consider adequate recovery. So in terms of in between your sessions, have you got adequate amounts of time to recover? For example, if your split is, let's say you're doing an upper lower split. Let's say your split, your split's upper lower, and you're training upper lower and then upper again right after you're not taking a rest day. Are you going into that session pretty fatigued, like physically, mentally, and just really feeling a bit wrecked and battered and not up for training? Are you going in with soreness in your upper body still? Are you going in that session and you just don't feel ready for it, don't feel like you're performing well, and feel like you're still, you're just under recovered from a mental standpoint and a physical standpoint? Then in that situation, you could consider either 1, doing less on your first upper body day, or 2, taking a rest day in between and doing upper lower rest, then upper again, or 3, you could simply change it to another session, like maybe an arm day, something like that. Because if we're not recovered in time, then we're not going to perform well, which means we're not going to have a productive session. So make sure you've got enough time to recover in between your sessions. And like I said, from a central nervous system standpoint, we get fatigued from, like, the more load we lift, the more fatigued we get. So every set is fatiguing. So if, let's say, we're not having any rest days, we're not having any chance to drop fatigue, which means we're not getting any chance to recover. And if we're not recovering, we're not going to be able to be in a good spot to perform well and grow. Something else to consider is, does whatever split you're on prioritize what you want to improve? So in terms of, like, your split, does it orientate itself around your weak body parts? Saying that, if you are new to training or you've not trained for a while, you probably just need more muscle everywhere. You probably just need to focus on getting stronger at basic movement patterns, like a row, like a squat, like a bench, like a deadlift, and you'll grow muscle. And like a high incline press or a shoulder press, you probably just want to get strong on those movements. Because, like, some people ask me, oh, what areas do I think that, like, what areas do they need to improve? And I look at them and, like, they've not got a lot of muscle everywhere. And I don't mean that from a negative standpoint or a rude standpoint, but it's true. It's like, if you're just starting out, you don't have any weak areas you need to develop. You just need muscle everywhere. You just need to focus on the basic movements and getting really strong in them. Because it's like, you can't tell if a muscle's weak, because everywhere is weak to an extent. And again, I'm not mean to be rude. I'm kind of in a similar position. Before this contest prep, it was kind of hard to see. I just thought, I need more muscle everywhere. And you never really know until you diet down as well. But don't stress about, I need to improve my biceps, or I need to improve my side delts, and don't stress about specialising towards it. However, what you should specialise towards is just, like I said, getting strong at those basic movements. They'll give you the most reward. They'll give you the most return for your investment. So try and have them relatively close to the start of your session. And of course, if, let's say, you just really enjoy, or your goal at the gym isn't to develop your whole body, it's just to develop, let's say, your legs for a certain reason or whatever, then you can obviously look to place that at the start of the session, or commit a day towards that body part. Like, if your arms are weak, adding an arm day, but don't get too swamped down with trying to make sure you're got a balanced physique or bringing up weak body parts when you've not been training for a good while. And yeah, if you focus on, like, usually your strengths tell you what body parts are weak. For example, if you can bench just as much as you can squat, you've probably got weak legs. So that's a good way to figure out what muscle groups need attention, what muscle groups need work on. And in terms of something else to consider, lastly, is lower back loading. Does it give you appropriate amounts of lower back loading? Not too much, but not too little. And the reason I say this is it's not something to shy away from. We shouldn't avoid loading our lower back. Some people are overly stressed about it and think their lower back's super fragile, and it will be if you don't train it or do anything that's going to build the strength and resilience of your lower back. And however, don't do too much, and just take it into consideration. For example, if let's say you train 5 times a week and you do, let's say, a barbell bent over row, and the day after you do, let's say, a barbell back squat, the day after you do an overhead press standing, and the day after that you do another row, and then the day after that you do a deadlift, and you're doing all these movements that are going to load your lower back, sometimes it can only take so much of a beating. Because just like any other muscle group, imagine if you try to train your arms 5 days a week. You might have sore elbows from doing tricep extensions all the time. So make sure you're not doing too much, and some ways to tell is, are you picking up wee niggles or wee injuries in your lower back all the time? Or have you always got a sore and tight lower back? Obviously, if you're sitting all day, that's going to cause that as well, but do you think it's training related? And do you just get wee, wee pains from it? Obviously, I'm not a physio, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to say don't get checked out if you get a pain for your back. But if, let's say, you just feel like you tweak it all the time, then it could be from doing too much lower back loading. But again, I'm not a physiotherapist, but just from experience. So from there, you could potentially look to do less sets that are going to load your lower back, swap it for a movement that's not going to load your lower back as much, you're more supported, or just removing the movement that is loading your lower back. So instead of doing, let's say, a standing overhead press, do it seated, because that's not really going to, standing overhead press, we're causing ourselves to have to stabilise ourselves for not much good reason, when we can do it seated and get just as much output out of our shoulders. So I hope you found this episode valuable. Again, it's not some things were pretty random in terms of what I touched on, like lower back loading, and a few other things. They're quite sporadic points, but I just tried to touch on points that I don't think a lot of people consider, and just also things that people just don't pay enough attention to, which is what I've basically stated. But basically, if you want to build muscle, your split isn't what matters most. It is your effort, your execution, and then after that, making sure you're recovering effectively. If those variables are met, what split you're on doesn't matter an absolute ton compared to what I've just stated. Make sure they're in order, make sure those ducks are in line or whatever, and then consider the additional things, like maybe if the split, the order of it, or what days you do and if it's appropriate for yourself. But first, make sure you're nailing those basic things. And hope you've enjoyed this episode. As always, please share it on your story, tag me if you can, leave me a like, subscribe, rating and review depending on what you're listening to it on. I'd greatly appreciate it, and it would mean a ton. So thank you very much for listening, and hope everyone has a great day.